It's like the Brady Bunch.
Yeah, we got like a silent disco going.
To get.
So we're probably, if we're live, we're probably waiting on people to come in. Welcome everybody as you come in. We'll get started in just a second.
Yeah, we're going to give everybody just a second and then we'll get started.
Cap.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa. I'm from Watermark Books. I'm the children's coordinator here. And we are very excited tonight to get to celebrate Captain America, the Ghost Army. Thank you to everybody that's here with us. Just one thing, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and then we'll get to them at the end. I just want to take a minute now to welcome our guests. So we have Alan Gratz. He's the #1 New York Times bestselling author of several acclaimed and award-winning books for young readers, including Refugee, Allies, Ground Zero, and the latest 2 Degrees. Thank you for being here with us tonight, Alan.
Thanks.
We have Brent Schoonover. He's the illustrator who works in the fields of comic books and commercial art. In comics, Brent has worked on well-known characters such as X-Men, Ant-Man, Captain Marvel, and Black Widow. And then also joining us tonight are Collin Kelly and Jackson Lanzing, known colloquially as the Hive Mind. They are New York Times bestselling comic book creators known for Captain America, Sentinel of Liberty, Batman Beyond, Neo Year, Joyride, Star Trek, and Alyssa Milano's Hacktivist. Their most recent graphic novel, Dark One, debuted as #1 on the Amazon Fantasy Graphic Novel list and #5 on the Barnes & Noble bestseller Top 100 list. So we are very excited to have you all here with us. And we can't wait to hear about Captain Army. Or Captain America, gosh, the Ghost Army.
Captain Army!
Captain Army! That's a new character we're introducing.
Yeah,
it's all right.
Spoiler alert.
The number of times I've said Captain Marvel when trying to talk about Captain America, I can't tell you.
There's a lot of caps.
There's a lot of caps.
All right, so I'll turn over the floor to you guys and let's get started.
Thanks,
That's
Melissa.
good.
Thank you. Who wants to start?
Well,
Who likes Captain America?
Right here.
So
this guy.
If you
I didn't see Collin raise his hand. I don't think he's a fan.
I'm a winter. I love Bucky Barnes.
Oh, there we
go.
go. Very good answer. Good answer.
It's more of a Captain Army guy.
So yeah, I mean it's interesting because on this call you really have very much like the early Captain America adventures in Ghost Army, which finds Cap. I mean, Cap's like 18 or something in your book. Like he's young.
Yeah, we tried to go really young with him because we have a young audience. Like this book was a part of Marvel and Scholastic's collaboration, where they were already doing books for young readers. Like they had a Shuri from Black Panther, they had Miles Morales, Spider-Man. they had Ms. Marvel. And so we definitely wanted to make the characters as young as possible. We got a lot of that youth in there with Bucky for Collin, but I also wanted it to be real early days of Cap.
Well, I think it's really interesting because by doing that, it creates a kind of. We were talking offline just a moment ago to sort of bring people up to speed. We were talking about the things you do with Captain America. Like there's like certain just iconic things you can do with him, and they seem to have dramatic import, kind of no matter the context. You can turn up that dramatic import or turn it off, but there's just something ephemeral and awesome about seeing Steve drive a motorcycle or jump out of an airplane or throw his shield to smash a bunch of tanks, or I think like protect someone with the shield, like hold up at the last minute and stop something. With you have an incredible like double page spread of that in near the end of Ghost Army, which I won't spoil, obviously.
It's first page. It's all right.
Yeah.
There's the first page one. Yeah. And
I think that's that first double page spread, or pretty close, where he's in there protecting Bucky against a tank with that.
Oh thing. Yeah. You have the tank one. Oh, there's the mirror beat near the end as well.
Right. Yeah, I know.
But regardless, I just think it's interesting because all of those beats, when we play them in the comics now, because Collin and I write Sentinel of Liberty, which is the current ongoing Captain America series, so it's the most recent stories of Steve Rogers, like sort of chronologically. And here you have like some of the earliest possible stories with Steve chronologically. And in our book, we're doing the same things. We're like, oh man, you put him on a motorcycle and suddenly there's this wealth of history that's embedded.
Right.
Or you throw him out of an airplane, there's wealth of history. But with you, each of those beats kind of feels like the first beat. What was that like diving into?
No, yeah, totally. I was playing with the same tradition that you guys are in Sentinel of Liberty. I love every time I see Cap roaring on, down a road on that motorcycle, I just get the chills, because that's like iconic stuff. Like you said, throwing the shield, blowing stuff up, with the shield, and I've got a scene where he blows up a gasoline tanker and uses that to catapult himself up, higher up into the building. And you guys have got him riding it in lava and stuff. I mean, like, Cap uses, I love that. Cap uses his shield all the time. I think the most fun is finding like different ways to use the shield, right? And you guys get into that a lot. No spoilers there, but you focus on the shield in Sentinel of Liberty, which is really cool, and a whole different angle that we haven't seen before.
I love that. I love that tanker explosion, by the way. I hit that page and I was like, and it's one of those things where you get mad because obviously we have to find lots of different ways for Cap to utilize his mighty shield. And I was miffed because I was like, dang, that's such a good one. And now if we do use it, we'll have to credit you.
I know. Just put in the front, where you put Joe Simon and Jack Kirby's name, you can put my name there too.
That'd yeah. Just right next to Jack.
Just right next to those two guys.
Explosion by our
No big deal.
Well, so for Brent, for illustrating that, I actually drew like a really crude stick figure version of that. Did you get that, Brent? Did you see that?
Oh, yeah, it was in the script. I think that
I dropped it in there, I think.
Yeah, I was like, yeah. So I always enjoy I actually love when I get a script and a writer tries to draw something like that. I think it will. It kind of helps. I think we had that scene too where he jumps out the window and everything, and that was super cool. And that was a tricky scene to do because it was the force down, force up, and obviously I don't know if who's all read the book yet, so I don't want to give too much away. But we put him in the shield through a lot in this book. Yeah. So it was fun.
But it was cool to think about, like, these may be the first times he's done some of this stuff with the shield. Yeah. And that plays into another thing. So I know this is kind of like a big Marvel mega fan event kind of thing, build that way. So hopefully we have some longtime Marvel readers who are watching and who are reading the book you guys are doing right now and have been longtime Cap readers. But also hopefully we have a lot of kids who are watching who are fans from the movies or reading their first Cap comic books. And I really wanted this book, Ghost Army, to be one that rewarded longtime fans with those kind of scenes, but also was the kind of book that a kid could pick up who's maybe this is their first Marvel comic and they could jump right in and look, you guys must be dealing with this. We've got 80 years of Cap history that we're dealing with, and that's a lot as writers. So I wanted to make sure that you didn't have to know all those 80 years of history if you're a young reader picking it up. So I'm hoping that it's got Easter eggs and fun stuff for people who are longtime fans, but also is totally readable for new kids who don't know that long history of Cap in the comics.
Yeah. It's a thing that we say often, and just gets bandied around often in comics in general, which is that every comic is someone's first, right? And this used to maybe be more true when you could go into the drugstore and there'd be like a spinner rack, and you would just like pick up like, oh, I've got 50 cents, I'll pick up the new X-Men, and I've never read an X-Men before. Like that culture is a little different now. Like that doesn't exist quite the same way. It certainly does in certain places, but like by and large, it doesn't. Instead, now you have comic book stores, and then you have obviously digital comics, but you've also got like Walmart comics deals and all these various places that people, buy their comics, and some bookstores, like some just full-on booksellers have great graphic novel collections and even great single issue collections. That idea that you should be able to jump in on issue 4 of a comic and be able to read it and understand what is going on. I don't know that that's always possible, and certainly for us, I would say it's not. That's not like the preferable way to write, because sometimes you have to. That means your first 3 or 4 pages is really saddled with bringing the reader entirely up to speed. So in comics, that can be a little chancy. I think what's so cool about Ghost Army is that it is so fundamentally designed to be that. Like, yes, it's great if you're a Captain America fan. I loved it. I ripped through it like that. It was great. Cool. But if I was a kid and I'd never read Captain America, I would leave that not only with an understanding of Steve and Bucky's relationship, their history, who they are, the basics on them, the basics between their distinction, like how they're used differently, but also Wundagore and Mordo.
That's the fun thing. I wanted to show the room out there some of this stuff, which is so cool because it starts with dossiers on the characters. So
I'll put
guys, it says it's top secret, guys.
It does say top secret. So
that's why it's
redacted.
blurry.
The secret files, and then you guys swing right into the most favorite of all things, a map.
A map.
And it's just like, okay, we're starting with secret dossiers. We're starting with a map of places. That's literally says Castle Dracula. So it's like, I've never heard of a Captain America before, but I know I'm excited.
Yeah. No, that's it. And I had a ton of fun with that, putting on there, like we get Latveria on there, we get Castle Dracula, and then all that Wundagore stuff. Again, Easter eggs for the longtime Marvel fans. Wundagore is this mountain that's got tons of, like, the High Evolutionary was there, and the Maximovs have a history there, and there's a talking cow, and there's all kinds of there's all kinds of back history from Marvel, and I just make real quick mentions of that, just so if you know all that, it's hopefully awesome. If you don't, it doesn't matter. Like that's flavor, but the story is still Cap and Bucky fighting the Nazis, and a villain from somebody else's book. I don't know if I'm supposed to spoil that or not.
I don't want to. I think
I want to give away too much.
I already said one of their names. I apologize.
No, it's okay.
I didn't go back on that.
So I have a question. Alan and I, obviously, we kind of wanted to take our book and make it, accessible for people who have never really read a Cap book or even a comic book, really. When you guys got the opportunity to write Cap, obviously the fun part, I think, sometimes when you get on a new Marvel comic series, like a monthly book, is how much do you want to jump into the history? How fresh do you want to make it? How did you guys decide how you wanted to take your approach with the book?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's a really good question, Brent. It's funny because so much up until we kind of stepped in, a lot of the Cap run had been very much building on the history of Captain America. Ta-Nehisi Coates, his run was all about, confronting Red Skull and all these kind of classic this classic dark past of Captain America. But
specifically like Captain America villains like Scourge and Nuke and
And really, he did a great job kind of putting those to bed. So we were actually given a little bit of a boon in that we kind of had not a blank slate, but a pause. We had a breath for Captain America to analyze who he wanted to be. And when we did that, and also in speaking with our artist, Carmen Carnero, who we were gushing about earlier, one of the things that was important to her was to explore Steve Rogers, not just Captain America, because when he does pick up that shield, he does become a slightly different person. And so in knowing that we had Carmen and us certainly who wanted to explore the more humanist side of Steve, which is something that hadn't really been touched. That's kind of where we got a green light to, not create out of whole cloth, but to pick what we loved about the series to bring forward and otherwise kind of create some new stuff.
Well, and that's I think the interesting thing about doing monthly comics is that there's that constant argument or collaboration, depending on how you want to see it, between the past and the pieces that are on the table that move the needle and that people love and that frankly move sales, right? People want to buy a book with Red Skull in it. They may not know who a new character is. They might not know who the Outer Circle are. So their question of like, what does that mean? But on our side, what Collin and I have discovered is that we're really drawn just generally to new stuff. You can play the hits and you can play these old characters and they're really fun and they're really exciting. But one of the things that we really enjoy doing in the canon of comics is bringing new material to the table. I think like without the people who were doing that when we were kids, there are so many characters, including Bucky Barnes himself, right? Winter Soldier as a general concept that just wouldn't even be on the table without somebody taking a giant risk and without, Brubaker like putting his foot in the door and being like, I know this is the cardinal sin of comics, but I'm bringing Bucky Barnes back.
Right.
So we were really insistent that we do that again, right? Our line, we talk a lot about it being sort of like a mesh of Brubaker's tone and objectives and sort of the Wade tone and objectives. With
the man out of time kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. With that sort of like civilian personality that came before that.
I see. Yeah.
Laced into it. And like by taking those three things and trying to fuse them together, but then do it with all new villains, do it with all new characters, do stuff that's connected to the world And the more that you know about the Outer Circle, the more you'll start to realize, oh, that character has ties to this thing or this character has ties to that. But the more that we were able to build new stuff, the more it created story territory, which is like what you want out of a comic, right? We're not looking for an ending. We're looking to write something that can last
keep it going
well beyond us, right? We're trying to let this ball pick up moss as it rolls down the hill. And so it's that's a really exciting part of comics, I think, is that you don't have to contain yourself like that.
Yeah. The classic villains are tough because they're like comfort food, like especially for an artist, you get the chance to draw something you've seen as a kid. It's really, really fun. The only thing that's tough is I hate to say it, you kind of know that out over time, it's like you can only do so much with them. So this threat level of maybe the hierarchy or the status quo is really not going to change. Where if you bring something new to the table, the reader and even you, after a while, you're like, I don't really know where this could go. This could go in a completely different direction. It gives you a lot of more ways out, storytelling wise, which is,
you can be
really
more
fun.
Surprising, right? I mean, you can just be more surprising if you know this character. Even if they die, they're going to come back. It's a comic book death. With a new character, it could be the last you ever see of them until another writer resurrects them 20 years later.
Well, and that's again one of those things that I think we're really interested in is like for instance, so at the same time as we're doing Sentinel of Liberty, you have the Sam Wilson Captain America book, Symbol of Truth.
Yeah.
And Symbol is very much designed around the idea that, well, Sentinel is looking into the 20th century and what the 20th century meant to Captain America and what it meant without Captain America and what it meant to Bucky Barnes and, how we look at the history of the Marvel Universe once we have the revelations of the Outer Circle. The Symbol book, Symbol of Truth, is really about like big, fun, crazy Captain America stories. It's Sam Wilson versus Deadpool. It's Sam Wilson versus Doctor Doom. It's Sam Wilson versus Black Panther. It's like these big stories.
Right.
And I think what's been really cool there is watching that the new synergy of putting Sam Wilson up against those characters actually does create that feeling that you're looking for of like, oh, it's the stuff I love, but through a totally new lens that doesn't feel like I'm just playing the hits or like playing another iteration. Suddenly, the question of who wins in a fight, Sam Wilson or T'Challa, is a really interesting question that hasn't been answered several times, unlike who's going to win in a fight, T'Challa or Steve Rogers. And so I think that watching that happen has been really, really cool. And it's given us, again, that story territory to just run in the other direction and really play with new material so that when we do come back to some of those characters, like we have a I don't know if it'll happen, but like we have a plan for Doom we really love to do. if we get to it and we get to do our Doom thing is not like another Doom villain plot, because like we've seen, it's just they've done it, and neither is Tochi's. Like Sam's plot with Doom is not really a villain plot. It's like Doom's kind of an X factor in his book. So I think it's finding those ways to use those characters in new ways rather than trying to do just another they're the bad guy again stories, because I think that can run its course.
And I think Alan and Brent, you guys did a really cool, interesting thing with the Ghost Army. Like it's a really interesting kind of reflection. Obviously, you know, one of the most important things about Cap, or at least like from where we sit with Cap, is how he faces off with his past. But what you've presented is a young Cap who doesn't have that past to face off with. He's literally facing it now. And I think the concept of a Ghost Army, of all of the sins coming back, is just really heavy, especially when you start looking at its relationship with World War II. Some of the other characters, I believe Sophia is a resistance fighter, and you have the Japanese American soldier.
Jim Morita.
Jim Morita.
Yep. Howling Commando.
Two of that. I got 2 Howling Commandos in there.
You're doing the Lord's work. But I just wanted to know, like, can you riff a little bit about that for the audience? Like, you know, you think kids' book, you don't normally think, horde of murder ghosts.
Right. So I had a couple of different inspirations with that. Number one, I wanted something, and when you write comics for kids, there's a little bit of that you have to do differently than writing comics for adults. You like robots and ghosts and things that you can smash and beat on that aren't human, right? I mean, because then you're taking that violent element out of it, where you're not actually hurting other humans. Now, it is a war, and so there are war scenes where they're fighting the Nazis, and it's okay to punch Nazis in the face. In fact, I encourage it. And
that, kids?
Yes,
all the creators of Captain America agree that violence isn't ever the answer. Captain America would be the first to say that violence is never the answer.
But like Cap tells his young friend in your book, like when the time comes, be ready, and then hit him hard. So I wanted, first of all, to have some kind of a villain that we could fight, that wouldn't be fighting like humans. Ghosts work great for that. But also, as a person who's written about World War II in a number of prose novels, I'm often looking at not just what happened in that moment, but how we got there and where it took us from there. And in particular, in this case, I really like the idea of talking about how World War I, the ghosts of World War I, really led us to World War II. And that when these ghosts come up, the farther back the ghost machine is able to pull up ghosts, it's pulling up World War I ghosts, not just World War II ghosts. And now we have literally the ghosts of a former war who were involved in this. And Sophia and her grandfather, they've both been involved in this war, and her grandfather's been involved in the previous war. And when she suffers loss, she wants revenge. And it is really kind of a commentary on this never-ending cycle of revenge, right? And I did try to have a moment in there where Cap, this young Cap, who's really not dealt with this yet, he's not been flung into the future where he's got this long history yet. He's kind of seeing that for the first time, like, wow, oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch of stuff that brought us to this point. And that's old stuff for him later on in your book. So, I mean, there was all that stuff I wanted to get in there about that was an early idea. And I tried to build the story around this idea that if you keep taking revenge for being hurt, it never stops. And you guys play with this a bit too.
And I mean, I think that's one of the great things that Captain America opens up is an eye on history, which not to make you forget that it's candy and it's actually vegetables, but like there's a really beautiful opportunity in Cap to lace history and technology and development and secret history and all this stuff into the mix to create story. And so I thought that beat specifically of like looking at what it means to extend your ghost backwards and see that underneath the battlefields of World War II are the battlefields of World War I, and thus underneath the grievances of World War II are the grievances of World War I, and underneath and thus underneath our world, we just got done talking about punching Nazis. Underneath our world are the grievances of World War II, right? That like that the grievances sort of stack over and over. I mean, literally exactly what Annie just said. Like the ghosts of the Nazi era are like with us, right? So that was a big part of what we started to do with the Outer Circle. Was the idea behind the Outer Circle, for anybody who hasn't been reading Sentinel of Liberty, this isn't like a huge spoiler, I think it just sort of comes out in the annual, is that it was put together by a bunch of survivors of World War One who got to the end of World War One, looked at the world as it had been wrecked by it, and said, we never want this to happen again. We want to find a way to create an order over the world so that the uncontrollable chaos and violence of World War One, which had very little ideological point, right? World War One is a war that is built mostly on
like
politics and treaties
royal secession treaties that got messed up by an assassination, right? Like it's all just like Bismarck's plan falling apart. So it was like, why don't we look at what it would mean to like put order on this? And then we have this beat where the Outer Circle comes together and they all, they figured out their shape, which is the symbol of Captain America's shield, right? That's what we're doing in the book, is saying, what if that symbol on Captain America's shield was actually a map to a larger organization and to the shape of the 20th century? And they say, okay, that's what we are. We are the Outer Circle around this whole world. Great. Let's go have a great century. We're going to make it a good one. And then we have a double-page spread that's like, okay, 10 years later, there's another war. 10 years later, there's another war. 10 years later, there's another. And it's like, and every 10 years, you've got another. This is just, we had a whole 20th century where we had a very hard time learning the lessons of World War I and World War II. Because we, instead of thinking about them, we kind of glorified them, which is its own sort of comment on Captain America. So, which is to say, like, I think that's the cool thing about Cap, is you can't tell that kind of story about Batman. You can't really tell that kind of story about most superheroes. That most superheroes don't have that immediate accessibility to history and to like a thing, like cultural, like a shared cultural history that we all went through. And Steve really does. And even though he's like a kid in your books, like he's a, I mean, not kid, but he's a, an 18
young man.
He's young.
Man in your book. Even because he's coming out of that, or even as he's coming into that, he's coming in with all the optimism and all the hope. And Bucky's still at his side in your book, being like, yeah, but sometimes you got to be in the shadows, and sometimes things don't work out, and sometimes there's tragedy
things have to get messy.
Sometimes things have to get messy, and I think that conversation is obviously a conversation both of our books very much share.
I mean, your guys, your Cap and Bucky are having the same conversation 80 years later.
So it's worth, speaking of Bucky, it's absolutely worth pointing this out, because this is actually a little bit of Bucky lore that you show off brilliantly that's actually hard to find in other books, which so much of our book is based on, which is this idea that Bucky was supposed to be a Captain America. He was supposed to be the person who was getting the super soldier serum, because, as you point out in your pages, his parents were killed. He was raised on a military base. Like he was even trained. You have a great line here. I was eventually recruited for covert training special ops. And we got this little Bucky, like being a secret little 14-year-old murderer. Which he kind of was, maybe at least a little an assassin, right? But I think it's such a cool idea that, like, yes, they were training him even here, and he's so sweet and innocent and pure, such a good young man, and it's so fun to see how he will turn out, which is such a broody, dirty-haired, smoldery Sebastian Stan.
I even have him say at one point, man, I wish I had a superpowered arm. I'd use it to be a superhero.
I know. Oh my God. Literally, you did that, and I was like, because we just gave him a new one, right? He loses the arm in issue 5 of Sentinel of Liberty in a very like heartbreaking moment. And we give him a new arm that's like actually has like superpowers, like it can like turn into stuff, and it can become it's a new thing that's sort of expanded.
Is it like the redacted? Is it like the redacted thing?
It's the redacted technology in his arm now, so he can like turn it into a spike and stretch it out and do different things with it, hack computers. Nice. And we were like, well, yeah, he's gonna have that arm and it's gonna have superpowers, but for the first time he's not gonna be in any position to be a superhero with it. And that felt like such a fun switch around for us. And then I read that in your book, and I was like, "Oh, that's such a tragic beat."
It's poor Bucky's. It's poor Bucky's story all over. He wants to be a superhero, but he keeps his story is a tragedy where Steve's is a hero's journey. I mean, they're both they're both on that, but Bucky is just constantly trying. And the world is fighting against him being what he really wanted to be. Somebody says in the comments, Bucky can't catch a break, poor guy, and it's true, he can't.
But if he did, truly, if he did, it would actually kind of wreck the character, The character
Right,
can
right.
only
No,
be happy for
yeah.
so long before he's just not himself anymore.
Right. Well, that's why Cap's Cap and Bucky's Bucky.
Yeah.
I do want to get to Brent and drawing here in a second. I do want to give a quick shout out to one other historical thing I put in there just real quick, and that was to play off the ghost thing. So the Ghost Army was a real thing in World War II. Yeah. And this is a book that the World War II Museum in New Orleans put together for an exhibit they did, and it was part of my research. But in addition, once I had the idea for the ghosts to be the thing that they were fighting, I had this idea for this Ghost Army to put into a book, but I never could find the right book for it. But for everybody who doesn't know, the Ghost Army in the United States Army was a real army unit, and it was made up of artists and sound engineers and stage magicians, illustrators, people who were creative, and their job was to fool the enemy into thinking we had more tanks and men where we didn't have them. On D-Day, they dropped dummy paratroopers on the wrong beaches that had tape decks in them that were playing machine gun sound effects. And my favorite part, and Brent and I have laughed about this, if you poked them with a bayonet, they blew up, which I thought was pretty funny.
That's so funny.
But they're real, and so in addition to fighting a literal ghost army, because this is a comic book, they're also teamed up with the real life ghost army from World War II. Cap and Bucky are, and so they're fighting alongside that. So I wanted to give a quick, just bring that back into all our history discussion there real quick. But Brent, do you want to get fired up on showing us how you illustrated the character, and maybe we can talk with Collin and Jackson about how, like, the modern take on the costume and the look of Cap, and what changes maybe you guys made.
Or any. Well, so I drew mostly all of Captain America, the Ghost Army, digitally on a computer in Photoshop, and I use a thing called the Wacom Cintiq, which you can't quite see, and I got to wear this funky glove to not get the grease on the screen. So if you see that and you're like, what is he wearing? So that's what that is for. And I'm going to share.
You look like you're an X-Man. That's some X-Men character has got to have had a glove like that.
I'm Gambit.
Somebody from the 80s looked like that.
All right. So can everybody see my screen right now?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So this is a little Captain America sketch card thing I've got set up. And I go over here and I picked the Brent brush, which is my favorite brush. So I named it after me. And I've got like a really loose, just simple shapes here started for just a simple headshot. You know, we got some circles for the ears, and we got some lines for the head, the nose, the eyebrows, and all that. And we're going to get moving here. So since I've got that little light sketch going, I'm gonna kind of start doing basically like my pencils, and I'm doing them in blue because Alan, you asked this last night, and I thought that was a good point that I should have probably pointed out. But when I used to draw traditionally, like on comic book board and stuff like that, I used a pencil called the non-photo blue pencil that you could do all your kind of sketching in, and if you needed to make a photocopy of it, it wouldn't show up. So it's kind of a big thing animators used to use, and comic book artists kind of took it from there. And as you know, your tools change and stuff like that, you kind of try to keep things a little similar. So I still like to do my underdrawing in what I consider like the non-photo blue that I used to do. And so and
you said that sometimes you use a color from the costume if you're having a little fun with it. Who are the characters you've done?
Yeah, like I totally get nerdy. Like when I was on Captain Marvel, like one layer would be, you know, yellow to kind of represent her, and then red or something like that, just because I'm a big dork, and that's.
I was gonna say, you sweet, beautiful dork, you absolute nerd.
Yeah. So.
I color code our scripts, so I get it. Every Captain America line is red, white, and blue.
Absolutely, you gotta have fun. So
you change every individual letter to red, white, and blue.
Oh yeah. No, I gotta write in like a script to do that, right? Like
I love that the writers are over here acting like we know what anything is going on. And
I know, right?
Like, I'm just casually gonna make this beautiful portrait of Captain America.
I know, right?
And for anybody who's on this webinar who's wondering what it's like to work in comics as a writer, like this is it. It's watching somebody infinitely more talented than you try to do something that you cannot imagine doing.
Well, we can imagine doing it. We just
with
can't.
a kind of Yeah, with a kind of a casual flair and like talking to you while it happens. Like, you know what I can't do? Have a conversation while I'm writing a script. Can't do it. Can't do it.
You write giant page of a castle, and then you're like, I'm done for the day. I'm gonna go have
that's exactly. I write 100 horses, and then I hand it to an artist to draw. It's great.
Howard, the best thing, Brent loved me for this. Apparently, German helmets in World War II have an angle to them on the side that it defies illustration.
It was my kryptonite a little, as what I learned.
Damn Nazis.
Yeah,
it wasn't horses; it was those Nazi helmets.
Absolutely.
But that weird crossover between actual history design and these books is something we've also found to be really fascinating. There was a fun little story on that one where, so I was talking about the Outer Circle origin. So we'd shown in the future that when you see the Outer Circle in the future, they have a giant table that they all sit around that looks like the Captain America shield. We wanted to sort of anchor that in something that they all did when they first came together. Like they painted it on some kind of circular mechanism. And we were like, well, they're going to meet in a World War I battlefield, or like basically a replication of one. And they're going to be on this World War I battlefield. And so they can find like a tank hatch, that was the old Steve Rogers shield thing, was like, oh, it started as a tank hatch. So we're like, oh, that'll be great. They'll find a tank hatch and they'll use that to paint the thing. And we got through editorial, got through the script, everything was good, turned into our artist. And our artist on it, Kev Walker, who is just a genius, and not just like an artistic genius, like Magic the Gathering and all of his Avengers and like all his amazing work, but also just like an actual, like, he just has a lot of facts in his head. Like he's like a big research guy. So we turned in the script and we got back this thing from him that was like, it was a bunch of historical notes where he was like, actually, this character would have been in this particular like German city at this particular time, like whatever. And one of his things was, there's not a single tank in World War I with a circular tank hatch. All the tanks in World War I have square hatches. And we had to be like, oh, I guess it's not a circular tank hatch. What else could it be? And we had to be like, hey, what was circular? And he eventually found something that he liked. Like, okay, this is what it could be.
That's funny.
Wow. It was really funny. We were like, oh, I guess, all right, well, we can't do that then.
Right. Well, we had big conversations about the style of clothing that the civilians would wear. Sure. I was sending Brent pictures of the different uniforms to try and get those as accurate as possible. There's a real city in there, Brasov, which is a real city, and I sent Brent like this landscape of it. I'm like, here, just reproduce that. Just draw that, Brent. Just draw this whole city.
And we did.
You did. I didn't do it. You did.
When I was talking to Alan last night when we were doing something, and the one thing that is pretty incredible is how for 80 years of history with Captain America, his costume has barely changed at all. I mean, he's gone through different iterations and stuff like that. One thing I looked at a bunch of the old Simon and Kirby Captain America stuff during the war while I was reading it or working on this, and the one thing that I kind of kept with it that I liked a lot was they put his wings really high up on his head, almost to a ridiculous extent. In some pages, it was like, how did that not get shot off? Like they were ridiculously huge. And so I tried to take a few of the things like that and honor that sort of era and stuff like that, because Marvel did ask, like, the flaps that go over his boots and stuff like that to be kind of more realistic and not have that kind of look that he had maybe in the 70s and 80s.
Those Robin Hood boots that he was wearing back then. Yeah. And
so they kind of wanted a more dash of realism in his uniform, so he's got more of the utility belt. And so, but even that stuff, it's been around for quite a while in the last 20 years, where it's kind of been that way anyway. So we weren't exactly reinventing the wheel or anything with Cap here, but it was kind of fun to kind of pick and choose things that I liked. So like the wings, and then I did take like how to draw his scales. Like some artists love to draw all the scales, and I do not love to draw all the scales. So it was kind of like kind of looking at like Mike Zeck, John Byrne, Ron Lim and a lot of these artists that I really kind of grew up loving their version of Captain America and deciding, okay, I'm going to steal this from him, or I'm going to take this kind of approach with it with him. And that's kind of where I took a lot of how the scales, I noticed those guys didn't really draw the scales too much either. Byrne almost didn't draw them at all. It was just like, he was just like, nope, that's just a normal suit. And then every now and then he'd throw like a dash of them in there. And I kind of like that approach. I was like, all right, so that's kind of where I decided to take my approach with it too, is they were there, but they were not the most important thing to be drawing. So
there's a suggestion of them. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, and as to your point, it's like, it's hard. It's, like there are ways to update a suit, but they got to be small, especially because like they got it.
Yeah.
Right. Like you don't up.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
you can give Spider-Man
Right.
new suits, but they're never going to be better than his blue
Yeah.
and red
Original,
suit.
right?
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
this is
they're
like,
really
perfect. One and done.
they're kind of like really just temporary things for story based sometimes and stuff like that. So like when Tony Stark gave, Spider-Man his
Right, the Iron Spider
super
suit.
Spidey suit, it was like that wasn't going to last forever, even though it was a cool suit.
I mean,
also,
that
like,
was,
when we-
that-
Oh,
oh,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like when we were working with Carmen on kind of how she wanted to present the suit, the questions become, well, is this a hood? Is it a cowl or is it a
Right.
helmet? Right. Like, and she was
Yeah.
very insistent. She was like, well, his pants, he has these thick bulging muscles that must stretch with his pants. So like she has a seam on the pants specifically. She's like, oh, well, that's like the nylon seam where the extra give can go. And it's like, these are really interesting thoughts that ultimately don't change the suit. The suit is the suit.
Right.
But
They just make the suit more real, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And which
Right.
again, I think that's what the scales do. When somebody draws
Yeah.
all the scales, to me, I'm not saying you should. I'm not saying anybody.
Too late
but
now.
I am saying that, yeah, do all the scales, Brent. Writes in the script, like, there are all of the scales.
Must have every
must
scale,
have
and there
every
are
scale.
1,063,000.
Yeah, I will be counting. But no, but what it does to me as a reader, I remember the first time that I saw that with all the scales, was it made it suddenly feel real. Like I looked at it and I was like, oh, I believe this suit suddenly because it feels reinforced in a way that I didn't realize it could.
Yeah.
She did, like, Carmen made a couple of small adjustments to like his boots and his gloves to make it feel a little more tactical and a little bit less old fashioned, but without going full tack suit like Ultimate Captain America or something like that. And I thought that was really they were really like clever adjustments that didn't have to do much to get us a really long way. And we actually built it into the book. There's a suit up page in our issue 1 where Steve talks about the fact that other superheroes kind of had to, like, in a very Steve way, right? It's very self-effacing, but like Steve says, look, I'm lucky because other superheroes had to like fight and figure it out and analyze and build their own suits and like build machinery and like do all this other stuff that most superheroes have to do. Iron Man built his suit. Spider-Man sewed his own suit.
Sewed his own. Yeah.
Right. But Captain America got his suit right out the gate from the the guys in the lab, and and every day now gets to go out and clad himself in meaning. And so the suit is just it's like a bonus to being Captain America because he didn't actually design it. He was a part of that mechanism. And I really think that's one of those beautiful things about Steve is that he knows he's lucky. Like he knows that he's 1 in a million. He doesn't count on himself being 1 in a million. He doesn't say like I'm 1 in a million because I'm the best. There's nothing like that. He just was the kid who got picked. He was in the right place at the right time. He happened to be the only one who was ever made, and now he has to sort of live up to that legacy. And because he's Steve Rogers, he's able to. But it's like something about his decency comes through in the fact that his suit hasn't been refit. Like, that suit means
it doesn't have to
Why
be
would
more
you
than
change
that.
it? Exactly.
Right.
And whenever he's put it down, it's been fundamentally iconic.
Oh,
he became a nomad or whatever, right? Like it means
that was a big
lot
deal
for him not to wear the suit. It's like it really like draws the mind to something else.
Somebody
You're
says
like
you're
Bob
like
Ross on
Bob Ross.
I'm like Bob Ross.
I told Brent
you
you got to start a Twitch channel where we watch you draw. I mean, I would
I'm
tune in
just
to just watch you
captivated,
draw, right? I know.
Oh.
Well, you just have such simple, like such clean lines, right? There's not a lot of fiddly. There's just like every stroke is the confident stroke of a genius,
of a master.
But
one thing I wanted you to tell Brent. You told me this. you don't draw every line of your characters. You let the color do a lot of that work for you. So like mouth is really just 4 or 5 lines, but you've done so much more with the color. You want to talk about that?
Yeah.
Real quick. We'll get to questions in just a second. I know we're running into our question time, but Brent, go for that. And then if you've got any questions in the audience, put them in the chat and we'll get to them in a second.
Yeah. When I was younger, you kind of felt like you had to cover everything, right? You didn't really know how the process completely worked and stuff. And I always remembered, I was like, I really hate how I draw lips and stuff. And then it honestly, it took kind of watching how a few other creators did it. And I was like, oh my God, they don't draw it at all. And I was like, they just let the colorist do it. And there's kind of this like fine line of like learning that this is a team, like you guys are a writing team, but then creatively, I don't have to do everything. Like, we had Sarah, who is awesome colorist on this book. Like she added so much, like the ghosts in the Ghost Army. Like, when I was drawing them, I was just like, am I doing, like, are they hitting what they need to? And I was happy with them, but it wasn't until I saw her colors where like she got the ecto cooler green.
I put in my notes that I wanted it to be Scooby-Doo green.
The Scooby-Doo green. But I was like, this is exactly what they were supposed to look like. And you have to just, even as a creator, sometimes you just have to like realize like you're handing the baton off to somebody else, to do stuff. And so it's always good to do that and just kind of realize like, oh, the colorist is going to hit a home run on this, hopefully. And I think you guys are probably the same. It's like, you're done with it and you hand it off to an artist and you cross your fingers. And if it's someone you've worked with enough times, you probably know that that's going to be good. And it took me a long time to kind of figure that out and stuff like that. And so, now I know exactly how my lips are going to be done. So it's great. So, this is my cat. Go ahead.
No, please. We're about to go.
I was just going to say, this is my little Captain America sketch, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching it. It was fun to do, and I want to make sure we have enough time for Q&A and everything like that.
Yeah, what was that, like 10-15 minutes? That's amazing. That's great stuff, Brent.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to do the stop share on this, and then we'll get back to everybody else.
Sure. Amazing stuff.
Thank you.
I could watch that all night. I love it. Well, Melissa, if you want to come back on here, if you want to give us some questions, or I don't know if you guys, Collin and Jackson, wanted to pull some out of the chat, or if we were going to get them from Melissa. I don't know. We could all sort of look in here.
I can read a couple, and if you guys want to read some, you definitely can. I'll just go in order for now. The first one we got was from Ella. She says, will there be more books related to this one?
Oh, well, that remains to be seen. I hope so. There are a lot of Marvel characters who are around in World War II, and I would love to see a couple more of them team up with Cap. You know what I'm talking about. And I think we're going to see some of the ones that I would love to show up in my comic in Sentinel of Liberty, as they've hinted at, they've not more than hinted, they've dropped the names of the Invaders, which was a World War II team up with Namor and the Human
Destroyer
Torch
and Human Torch
and Toro, and so that would be great to see those characters. And I did drop 2 of the Howling Commandos in there.
Yes, you did.
Dum Dum Duggan and Jim Morita. And my idea was that if we got to do more, I'd add a couple new Howling Commandos every time until we had the whole team for one big Howling Commandos adventure at the end, which would be time to give a.
I'm gonna call up Daddy Marvel. I'm gonna make sure that he knows.
If you can put in a good word.
It's really funny. We have a thing that has not been announced that I can't talk about yet, but hopefully we'll be able to talk about soon. And it's coming out this year, where we're kind of pulling a similar trick for a different part of the Marvel universe. But that idea of like, how do you slowly integrate a thing that we only know as a giant group? Okay, how do you individually characterize each of them so that when they come together as a group, we know why each of them is important? Like that, it's a really cool idea. And I mean, honestly, I think I learned more about Jim Morita in your book than I ever learned out of the character of reading Captain America.
So he wasn't one of the original Howling Commandos, but he got added later, and he was a U.S. Army Ranger who was that the Howling Commandos worked with. But the Howling Commandos were really famously very integrated right from the start. They had a black soldier. They had one of the first openly named Jewish, so who claimed on page to be Jewish. Later characters were retconned to be Jewish and that sort of thing. But they had diversity, and they brought in this Japanese American soldier very early on. And so, and this was the 1960s when the Howling Commando books were being done. And the very first issue of the Howling Commandos, Gabriel Jones, the black soldier, came out not black. When they sent the book off to be printed, they assumed that they had made a mistake with the colors, because who would put a black character in a comic book? Right?
They had,
Yeah. The first book, he doesn't look black, and you know, Jack Kirby had to call him up and say, the dude's black. Just keep our colors, don't change it. And so I love that history of the Howling Commandos, and I'd love to build to that. And Brent, it's so cool because Brent had already drawn Dum Dum and a different version of the Howling Commandos. You want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, so I originally, one of my first ongoing I got at Marvel was Howling Commandos of S.H.I.E.L.D., where they took these obscure like B horror characters from the Marvel universe, which was so my cool. Thank you. I wish I could say it was a dream book, but I didn't even think it would ever be possible to do anything like that. Yeah. And Dum Dum, there was a life model decoy that was, so you could kill Dum Dum in every issue, like he was like Kenny from South Park. That was such a so fun. And so I got to draw, and I loved drawing. I quickly realized how much I loved drawing that character. And when the book got canceled, I was so sad. I was like, well, I got, you know, X amount of issues with him. That was fun out. And then, so when I got the script and like he showed up on like page 2 or 3, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. So yeah, I was pretty excited about that.
Awesome.
So I'll jump back in with another question here. This one's from Robbie. He says, are we going to learn anything about Redacted's origins in SOL?
Yeah, so Sentinel of Liberty, we introduced this character called the Redacted, who is starts as what's called a star point, basically an agent of the Outer Circle who is sent to destroy Captain America. Captain America is getting too close to their mystery, and so they send the Redacted, and the Redacted is this big sort of quicksilver metal character who can change his shape and can become a lot of different things, and seems to have basically like a voice box, like doesn't seem to have his own thoughts or speech, and just sort of says like, you've been redacted, history will not remember you, and just wants to kill Captain America. And because Steve is Steve sees behind that and realizes there's a skeleton in there, like there's a body in there. So he's like, well, there is a person underneath all of this somehow. And so spends all of issue 4 convincing the Redacted of the decency of humankind, and specifically of the sort of righteousness of Steve's cause, and inviting him into the cause. And so at the end of issue 4, Redacted switches sides pretty quickly, and goes from villain to at least like sort of part-time hero with the crew. And we have a longer plan for Redacted. Whether or not that tips out is going to be a question for the future, but I think it's, at the very least, we're going to be able to transition that character maybe out of that moniker and into a new one, as we learn more about them and what's going on. I
love that name though, especially in a Cap book that's so much about history, and
it felt right.
And when Bucky's reading through all the files and trying to get at the heart of things, and he's saying like there's more black marks in these where stuff has been redacted than stuff I can read. I mean, it's such a perfect synergy of villain name and what's going on in the larger world. I thought that was
Alan. I think that was from our Winter Soldier one shot. That was part of Devil's Reign. My goodness,
you just right.
Perhaps it was.
You read the deep stuff. I love it.
But to answer the question specifically, I believe in issue 9 or 10, you're going to be seeing a good slice of what the flip is going on with the Redacted.
Yeah.
How far do you guys? Go ahead.
Oh, so issue 8 came out yesterday.
Yeah.
And issue 9 comes out in a month, and issue 10 will come out a month from there. We have written up to we're writing issue 13 right now.
Wow. Okay.
Which is the middle of our crossover event, Captain America Cold War.
Yeah, Captain America Cold War, which is Sentinel and Sybil are going to cross over into like this big sort of climactic event. And that's
who could have seen it coming?
I know.
I had no idea.
That's starting in May, and that's really going to bring most of the story threads from both books to a head in this one big crossover, as well as a big story thread that, well, I guess it started to get pulled in Symbol, but it's really going to blow up in Cold War. So we're really excited to show that off. And yeah, Redacted is not a big part of Cold War, but the stuff before that is going to be a big part of sort of framing out that character. And then coming out of Cold War, we've got some big plans. So yes, effectively, short answer is yes.
We've probably got some time for one or two more questions.
Yeah, we got
Yeah, perfect. Okay, I've got another one here. I believe this one's for you, Alan. It's from Kelsey. She writes, will you ever write a book about the Titanic?
Oh, I get a lot of requests about Titanic. So I don't know, Collin and Jackson, if you know, but I've written a lot about. I've got stories about D-Day. I'm working on a book about Pearl Harbor. I've done a book about 9/11. So I've written about big events for young readers. And so a lot of kids ask me if I would write about Titanic. There are already a bunch of good books about Titanic, and the trick would be finding a story that hasn't been told about that night. And this is a challenge. It's a challenge about writing for Cap, honestly. What's a story you can do about a character who's been around for 80 years that hasn't been told? It's on my list. I'm interested, but I've got to figure out. I tell you what I'd like to write about before that is the Hindenburg explosion. That one I'm totally in on.
My wife's grandfather, I believe, Alex? Was it your grandfather who was on the Hindenburg?
No way.
Yeah. So my wife's grandfather was on the ground crew of the Hindenburg.
All right.
Oh, good.
Cool.
If you're going to be on the Hindenburg,
that's better.
Yeah,
that's better than being on the
actual
thing.
Was below it saying, "Oh, the humanity." That was him.
Look out! Run! Yeah.
I would love to know more about that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I was the kid who would have as a kid I would have read all of your books, but I would also be asking for a Titanic book because that was my personal obsession.
Well, I'll do what I can.
Thank you.
Matt, might I suggest from the iceberg's perspective?
Oh, I like it. Now I do have I've got a friend named Alan Wolfe who wrote a book called oh shoot, now I'm gonna forget
Great title.
the title of it. I'll look it up. Yeah, I know. But he actually tells the story of the Titanic, and one of the characters is the iceberg. He actually has the iceberg talking about like running into the ship. I can't believe I'm
having such a nice day. Just really enjoying. Ouch.
Yeah. I'm gonna find this book title real quick. And you can order it from Watermark. The Watch That Ends the Night. The Watch That Ends the Night. I can't believe I forgot the name of it. So no, that's a great suggestion. I appreciate it. It's on the list. What else we got?
Okay, so I'll finish it off with this one. It's from Lindy. Alan, how did writing, researching, and writing this book differ from some of your other books? Oh,
so this was the first graphic novel that I've written, which I'm super excited about. I've written one more since then that we're trying to find an artist now. I wrote a book called Refugee that's about 3 different kids in 3 different times in 3 different parts of the world who are all trying to escape violence and find new places to live. And that's been a big book. It's a prose novel, and I wrote up a graphic novel script, and we're working on finding an artist for that project, which I'm really excited about. So if you've read Refugee or you're a fan of that, that's to come. But this one with Brent was my first time, and I was joking with Brent before, when I write a novel, if I'm writing a scene that has a lot of snow, right, I don't want to use the same word snow 10 times on a page, right? Because then it's like snow. But when I'm writing a graphic novel script, I can write snow as many times as I want, and then Brent just has to draw a bunch of snow. It's pretty awesome.
That's exactly right. It's a completely different vibe in that way. Did you find
replace snow with tanks, and that's the Ghost Army?
Did you find that you were how was it adjusting your process to like the graphic novel process? Did you get sample scripts? Like how did you, because for anybody who doesn't know, there is no standard script for graphic novels. Comics and graphic novels are an extremely sort of Wild West environment still in that regard, just in terms of format. And so while a lot of other things have become very codified in writing, screenplay format's very codified. In many ways, novel writing is codified. In many ways, I mean, just a lot of the stuff is. Graphic novels really aren't. What was that process of sort of like?
So they shared with me a script from the Ms. Marvel comic that Scholastic and Marvel have done together, so I could see how that one was written. Also, Marvel did like a Marvel 101 with me, and they have a I don't know if you guys, maybe you didn't need this, but I did. They
Boot
did
camp.
it was a boot camp, and they did like a PowerPoint thing.
They've never let us do the boot camps. When we started at DC, they did a whole boot camp, and we asked. We were like, "Hey, we're new at DC. Can we do the boot camp?" And they were like, "You guys don't need it." And then like we came over to Marvel, and they didn't even offer it.
They're like, "Oh, you got this down." Well, they figured I needed it.
They quit doing the artist boot camp just as I started getting in, and I wanted to do it so bad because they would just bring in such legendary guys to just to come in and show you inking tips and all this stuff, and I was like, what? That sounds amazing. And they're like, yeah, we don't do it anymore. And I was like, so
I have some books. I had some other scripts that they had done. We went through the thing where they talked about, a good number of panels per page. And I didn't know that, sometimes they don't want to have more than like 2 sentences per word balloon. I'm like, oh, that's news to me. Things like that, where, I mean, you can break all those rules, but you don't want to cover up Brent's awesome art or Carmen's awesome art with too many words per panel. Right. So that stuff you gotta learn.
You don't want to,
but you do it anyway.
You do. I often read our books. Like I'll we'll do lettering passes on our books and we'll sort of rewrite stuff at the last minute. And
I'm like, okay, I could do without.
Sure
almost inevitably, you're just
I know.
Yeah,
I'm like, I gotta
do
this.
You're just getting rid of stuff because the art is doing it for you. Like why?
I'm like, bro, Brent's art is doing this. Why do I have to say this?
Even to this day, I'll reread books that I wrote just like a year ago that Collin and I put together, and I'll look at them and be like, we could have cut like 50% of the words out of this.
I know.
Our words are perfect and everyone loves them.
Yeah,
That's right.
I know.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I tell myself every day when I get up.
There you go.
All right.
I used to say.
And on that note,
this was absolutely so much fun. Thank you all for being with us, and all of our Watermark fans and everyone that joined us online. It was a ton of fun, and what a great way to end the evening.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, right on.
Thank you.
Order books from Watermark Books.
Do
get your
it.
books from them. They're the reason we got to talk to you tonight.
I'm going to assume
physical books.
I'm going to assume that Sentinel of Liberty, the Volume 1 trade, that you guys will have a copy. So everyone order from them. That's a great idea. The trade will be out next month. If any of this sounded neat to you, and if you loved Ghost Army and you want to see what's happening in the modern book, like grab it from Watermark. That's a great way to get on board everything we've been talking about.
We have some fun swag to send out with your order. And you guys, we just cannot thank you enough for being here tonight and for just blessing us with your presence. This is amazing. Love the conversation.
Well, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
All the best.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Alan, Brent, such a pleasure, guys.
Yeah.